Hi everybody, Hassan Shariq, regulated Canadian immigration consultant, going live for another update on Canadian immigration. And in this today's live session, I'm going to talk briefly about the proof of funds requirement, which is a common query, common question that aspirants of Canadian skilled migration have. So first of all, proof of funds, and this is specifically for express entry applicants. Um, what is proof of funds? And what is the concept of proof of funds? So see, if you qualify under any of the immigration streams under express entry, and you have to move to Canada as a skilled migrant, the expectation is that right away, once you land in Canada, you might not be having a job from day one. It may take a few weeks, it may take a few months before which you can end up landing into your first job. So for most of you, you will be coming with your families. So government does not want people to be in a situation where they end up not having enough funds to take care of themselves or their families. So this is the concept of proof of funds. So based on the composition of your family, like how many family members it is, and I'll talk a little about that in a bit, you're expected as part of your application for the express entry, you're required to show evidence of enough funds with you that you can have with you once you move to Canada, and utilize those funds for the initial few months while you might be looking for jobs. You are relocating, you might require new furniture, you might need to put in some deposits for the first place that you rent out. You will have to apply for a few licenses and get this new stuff. So there is going to be some cost. So the concept is that you have enough funds which can cover the minimum necessary funds required to live for about 6 months, and it is based on your family composition. A lot of times I get to have this question: if you're required to pay these funds or submit these funds to anybody. No, not at all. This is not an amount that you have to spend. You have to show that you have enough funds with you to cover such a cost if it may arise. So that's proof of funds. When are you required to provide proof of this? You're required to provide proof of these funds only once you receive an invitation to apply. Say if you're applying for the Federal Skilled Worker Program, once you receive the ITA, the invitation to apply, that is when you're supposed to provide the proof of these funds. So you do not have to submit them to anybody. You do not actually sort of need them at the beginning of your process or during the preparation of your process. Under the express entry streams, which are the categories who need proof of funds? So basically, you will be required to show proof of these funds if you are under either the Federal Skilled Worker Program or the Federal Skilled Trades Program. Who doesn't need these proof of funds, even if you're coming through express entry? So if you have a valid job offer from within Canada, like if you're moving for the first time and you have a valid job offer against which you're coming, or if you're already in Canada, like you're a Canadian experience class applicant, maybe already working in Canada, or some other stream and you're already working in Canada, you already have a job, then you're not required to show proof of these funds. So all the applicants these days who are receiving the CEC invitations within Canada, they are technically not required to provide the proof of funds. If they do, that's fine. But if they can provide proof that they have they're on a job or they have a valid job offer, then there is no need to provide the proof of funds. Now, how much money do you require? So this is dependent on the composition of your family. And how do we how do we calculate the number of family members? So it is yourself. If you're married, your spouse. So that will be you and your spouse. And if the two of you have children, the number of children. So give an example. If you're married and you have two children, the family size will be counted as four: you, your spouse, and two children. So that's how the family size is counted. You're to be counted within the number of the family for this purpose. So depending on what is the size of your family, Government of Canada every year comes up with a list, with a detail as to for how many family members, what is the minimum required funds. Right now, if we look at the most updated fund requirement, and I'll share the exact table in the description of the video later on, or it can be on my social media platform as well. If you are just one person, it is 12,960 Canadian dollars. So you have to show funds equivalent to this amount. If it's two people, it is 16,135. For three, 19,836. So it sort of increases by about $3,000 per person. The way it goes is that if it is 7 family members, it is about $34,000, and then for each family member, it is $3,400. So for many people who are married and they may have like maybe one kid, it is about 19,836. Now coming towards what is accepted as proof of funds. And that's why in the initial introduction, I mentioned that what is the whole purpose of these proof of funds. The purpose of the proof of funds is that you have enough funds, liquid assets, not necessarily cash, but anything close to cash, liquid assets that you have, which you may use in the first few months when you move to Canada. So it has to be liquid assets, preferably cash. If you have term deposits, that's fine as well. A lot of people usually ask this question, like I have real estate, I have a property. Is that acceptable? No, that's not in liquid form. See, if you have a real estate, you might have a house somewhere. It might be worth like $1 million, but you can't really use that value to pay for your groceries once you come to Canada, like not in itself. So it has to be liquid assets. Yes, if you have different kind of assets, like maybe you have a car, you have a real estate, and once you get your invitation, you can sell that. Like if you don't have enough cash, you can sell that, provide proper documentation, proper trail of that, and use that money to show that you have proof of funds. But no matter what the value of the asset itself is, if it is not in a liquid form, it cannot be used as a proof of fund for your express entry application. In terms of the proof itself, so there's always these questions as to should it be a bank statement? Is this acceptable? If this not acceptable, how old should be the bank statement? Two very important things. The two legal tests that are there. Number one, the funds should be your ownership. When I say your ownership, if you are a married person, then it can be the ownership of the principal applicant. It can be joint ownership of the principal applicant and the spouse. It can be in a joint account. And it can be your spouse. There can be an instance where you're applying as the primary applicant, but you have a non-accompanying spouse. If the funds are solely in your spouse's account, and not in your account or not in a joint account, and the spouse is non-accompanying, it can be accepted, but then we have to show that you have access to those funds as well. So the two important legal tests for any proof of funds to be accepted are number one, ownership of the principal applicant or the principal applicant as well as the spouse. So you cannot really borrow it from a friend and say that these are your funds to be used as proof of funds. So ownership, number one, and number two, access. So if there are funds which are even in your name, and I'll give you an example that a lot of time people are working in various government entities or private entities, and they have a provident fund. So depending if that provident fund is encashable right now, it is acceptable because you have access to it. Whenever you wish, you can encash that, you can use that money. But say, for instance, there's a provident fund which is non-encashable, and you can only withdraw it at say a certain age, like maybe once you hit 60, or there's a specific time period that you could only take it after 5 years, then that's not acceptable. So ownership, the funds are to be owned by you, the funds are to be accessible by you. These are the two important tests. In terms of the best way to do is a bank statement, a term deposit with a bank. So if it can be for like 3 to 6 months, 3 to 6 months prior to the time that you submit the proof of funds or the bank statement with your application, that's fine. There shouldn't be an issue. There are instances, as I mentioned just earlier, that you might have a car, you might have a real estate property, and you would want to sell that once you get the ITA and then use those funds as proof of funds. If you have such instances, you can always provide documentation. Like if it's your own car that you sold, you can clearly provide documentation that the car's ownership was yours. You sold it, money came into the bank account, and now it is with you. So in this instance, if you provide proper documentation and you explain it well, even if it is not 6 months old or 3 months old from the time that you submitted your proof of funds, that's perfectly fine. If there is some other instance, like there is a usual case wherein sometimes your close family members, your parents, or your close family members, siblings, they give you that money. You can't borrow that money. If that money has been transferred to you and based on whichever country you're applying from, legally through a court procedure, if the ownership of that money has legally been transferred to you and there is proper court documentation for that, even if it was like a day or two before your proof of fund submission, it can be accepted. So in a nutshell, I would come back to the two legal tests. Legally, those documents should be in your ownership. If it is for 3 to 6 months, great. If it is less than that, you have to provide trail and supporting documents. And the second test, access to these funds. What else? Okay. In terms of bank statement, if it comes as a bank statement, you could show this through a bank statement on the letterhead, providing these evidence. Sometimes, so there's the possibility of a bank statement. Sometimes I've had clients and queries where people have said that we have term deposits. Will that work? Yes, as long as that is encashable. So whenever you need it, if it is encashable, that can be used as well. And lastly, I've had a few queries and questions where people have said that we have different kind of bonds. Now, for a lot of you, bonds might have different meanings in different countries. So in some South Asian countries, there are bonds which are basically prize bonds. So they're lottery tickets basically, but generally they're called as bonds. Prize bonds will not be accepted in itself because on a prize bond, there is no title of ownership, so as in the case of Pakistan, there are prize bonds. A prize bond can be for 5,000 Pak rupees or 10,000 Pak rupees, but it does not say that this particular prize bond belongs to this particular person. So it cannot be used like that. Some countries, a lot of places, a bond actually means a term deposit. Now that term deposit can actually be for a specific person. So if the ownership is for a specific person, that is acceptable. So depending on what the definition of bond is, that's how it is. And then do you need to carry them with you? Not necessarily. Keep one thing in mind once you apply, because this figure of the exact amount of proof of funds, this can vary year to year. So you have to keep these funds updated. If there is a possibility of currency exchange while your application is in processing, I would highly recommend adding a little more than the required amount once you submit, so that if there's a fluctuation, it is covered. If the drop in amount is only very small, because of such a fluctuation, they're not going to refuse your application just because of that. They might ask you for an updated proof of funds, and then you can add a little more funds and provide that. But there should not be large discrepancies. Also keep in mind that if you make your express entry profile and you have funds, say somewhere in December, and in January there's an updated amount, you have to provide that updated amount. In terms of once you're granted the PR, then you're not sort of required to keep those funds. You can withdraw it from the bank account and stuff. Once you do your landing, at that stage, you might be asked to provide evidence that you still have those funds. So it's not that you have to carry all of them, but you have to show that you have enough funds. Sometimes you're asked, sometimes you're not asked, but still that's a requirement. There have been some questions posed to me in which people have asked that if I have a non-accompanying spouse, like my family and my children, they're not accompanying with me in the first instance, do I still require to show proof of funds for my whole family? Yes. So say if you're a family of 4 people, you, your spouse, and 2 children, and the application is non-accompanying, and the principal applicant is going to travel to Canada in the first instance, still you're required to show proof of funds equal to equal to the amount for 4 people. The reason is that once you move to Canada, probably you might not be working in your home country. You would still be required to meet the expenses of your of yourself in Canada and your family who are back home, whichever country they are. So accompanying, non-accompanying spouse, doesn't matter. The funds to be shown are based on the number of family members that you have. I think that's all in a nutshell on this topic. I'll have a look at the queries if there are any specific questions. Sayyid Rajas Ahmed, salam. I hope you're doing good. I like your videos. Thank you, Sayyid. Wa alaikum assalam. Great to hear from you, and thanks for your appreciation. Hamza Afzal, hello sir. Hello Hamza. Is there any change in proof of funds? There's no change in proof of funds, Samir. I just wanted to sort of do a video on this and talk about these few things, because a lot of times applicants have these confusions in terms of proof of funds. Hamza, is there any option for a family of 6 to immigrate? Well, Hamza, the family of 6, even if it's a family of 16, it can immigrate. It will not depend on the number of family members. It will depend on the various factors, like the principal applicant. Is the principal applicant eligible for any stream? So yes, if the principal applicant is eligible, a family of 6 can definitely immigrate. Ajay, do CEC people need POF? And if yes, what is acceptable? No, CEC people are not required. If you're already in Canada and you're on a job, you're working, you are not required to provide proof of funds, because see, again, the whole concept of proof of funds is that you will move from some country to Canada and you might start looking for a job. So maybe 2 months, 3 months, 4 months, you don't have any income, so you must have enough funds with you to cover your and your family's cost. if you're already in Canada and you're already working, then there's no need. So CEC applicants a lot of times are already working. They have a job, so they have an income. They do not have that transitionary period. So CEC applicants, no. Z-Boy, tell me about chef course. Chef course. This particular stream is about proof of funds, and also chef course. I'm not into admission processing and stuff, so you can definitely check with the colleges and stuff. I'm really sorry, can't really help you with that. Mohammed Awais Khan, hello. Will money in Payoneer account be acceptable as proof of funds? Good question. Now, this is a little tricky and technical. And I'm not really an expert at the Payoneer account. I know the whole concept, but if that Payoneer account fund is accessible with you, first, it is in your ownership. And as long as it is a financial institution which says that your funds are there whenever you want, you can withdraw them, perfectly fine. But if you can't withdraw them right at the time that you want, then it will be tricky. So you have to provide evidence that this Payoneer account is a financial institution or a place where your funds, liquid funds, are parked. Whenever you would require, you can withdraw them. And as long as you can get documentation from Payoneer, and they can provide you the documentation that these funds have been there in your name. There are no credits against it, no encumbrances against it. It's perfectly fine. It can be used if they meet the test of ownership and accessibility. I have Payoneer account on my name and have sufficient funds there. Yeah, can I show that statement as POF? I've already sort of answered that. As long as they're encashable, yes, and as long as you can ask the financial institution to issue you documentation which shows the amount of fund, your ownership, that's perfectly fine. Yeah, so that's about it. I think we've covered some major areas of proof of funds. Nothing else, no more questions. Hopefully next weekend I will be back again with a live stream on one of the topics. I would highly appreciate if you have specific areas that you would want to learn about. I'm not saying about individual applications, but generally topics like proof of funds, any immigration streams. Do comment on in this particular video once it's uploaded. Do comment, suggest topics, and I'll be happy to sort of come up with videos on that. If there are specific topics that people would like to talk, comment about it, and then probably these live sessions that I'm now going to do frequently over the weekends, I will make those topics, and then we can have question and answer sessions on that as well. So do comment, do provide the feedback, do raise questions and queries through the comment section. We have a few questions, so I'll just quickly look. Zenobia Bashir, in case of saving account, if I take money from my father and maintain it for 3 months, will it be acceptable, or I'd have to submit a supporting document? The exact I can't really say, because unless I have the documentation in front of me. But if the funds, if it is a recent transaction that happens, like all of a sudden that money comes into your account, then it is always advisable that you have proper documentation that what is the source of those funds. Like if your account had only, say, maybe $2,000, and all of a sudden there's $20,000 coming into it, and it's only been a few months, and you don't have like a regular salary coming into it and being saving, and it's come from maybe your parents or somebody, I would highly recommend having proper supporting documentation for that, and for that legal ownership of that, as well as showing the proper trail, like how did that money come into be. If it was provided by one of your close family members, it was gifted to you, it is your money, and it's been there in your account for several months, then it may work. Yeah. Wes, thank you very much, Hassan. Much appreciated. Keep doing the great work. Thanks for your positive words, Wes Khan. Ajay, can we ask about next draws? Ajay, yeah, you can ask. Now it depends. If you're asking about the federal skilled worker program draw, I don't think it's going to happen anytime before um, um, end of June at least. If you're asking about CEC draws, they're happening every 2 weeks. So we'll have them in another 10 days time. Hamza as well, can you talk to a person if he has questions related to immigration? If yes, then how? Well, if you want to discuss, Hamza, specifically your particular case, then that's a paid service because I run my own immigration consulting firm. If you want to have, or anybody wants to have their immigration application represented through my firm, or you would want to have a consultation for a specific thing, you have to pay for it. What you can do is that on many of my videos, you'll find my email address, which is info@shariqimmigration.com. You can send an email. You can book for a consultation. You'll be provided with all those details. If you want to ask 1 or 2 specific questions, that's a consultation. And definitely we can do that, but that's a paid service. If somebody wants to have a generic assessment of their overall profile, you can send your CV, your date of birth, your details on that email address, and myself or my staff will review and tell you what are your chances under various categories. Thanks for answering. Do you know about ministerial instructions? Yes, I do know about ministerial instructions. Those are the legal documents that we, all the immigration lawyers and practitioners, we follow. I don't know what specific questions you would want to know for that. So we'll keep it for a later discussion session. I think that's about it for today. Thank you for being part of the transmission. And as I said, that for those of you who've been part of this, and for those of you who see the video later, if there are any specific topics that you would want to know about, put that in the comment section, and I'll be more than happy to do live sessions as well as make videos for those topics. Fair enough. Thank you very much, all. It's great connecting with all of you. So till the next time that we meet, take care, and Allah Hafiz from Hassan Shariq.